Our moment in history and the places we live in are not an accident. Which is why with Jesus, goodbyes are never ultimately goodbyes. Saying goodbye to those we love is hard. Goodbyes can be painful. We can feel sad and regretful and perhaps even angry. But saying goodbye can also benefit us. As seasons and relationships draw to a close, we have opportunity to articulate things we've taken for granted or felt but never said. If we just slink away or live in denial, pretending there are no goodbyes to say, we rob ourselves of this opportunity. So there's an art to saying goodbye. Good endings can bring fresh hope and new beginnings. This is evident in one of the most emotional scenes in the Bible, recorded for us by Luke in the book of Acts. The Christian leader Paul is passing through a part of modern Turkey. He knows he'll never be there again, so he calls together the elders or leaders of the church in Ephesus to say goodbye. Back in Ephesus, Paul had taught about Jesus in the synagogue and debated seekers and skeptics in the lecture hall of Tyrannus. Luke tells us that this went on for 2 years, so that all the Jews and Greeks who lived in the province of Asia heard the word of the Lord. Over 2 years, Paul would have got to know people in Ephesus well. A riot meant that Paul's exit from the city had been quicker than expected. Perhaps that's why, as he passes by, he's now especially keen to part well. So he asks for the church's leaders to meet him in Miletus. There, Paul says goodbye, conscious that this will be the last time he'll see them. Because after visiting Jerusalem, he plans to take the good news about Jesus to Rome. Let's notice 3 things about Paul's goodbye, which can speak into our goodbyes too. Firstly, saying goodbye means appreciating our relationships. As Paul reflects on his time in Ephesus, he recognizes that things weren't all easy. In fact, they were full of challenge. Paul speaks of tears and severe testing, yet Paul was so committed to telling people about Jesus that he'd engaged Jews and Greeks, publicly and house to house. Some of those now standing before Paul had likely become Christians through him. Some of them would have seen Paul's tears firsthand. Very often, our deepest relationships are with those who've shared significant experiences with us. Perhaps those who've told us about Jesus, or we've served alongside, or with whom we've even shared tears. As Paul and the Ephesian elders say goodbye, both parties recognize the significance they've played in each other's stories. Back in Athens, Paul declared that the living God marks out our appointed times in history and the boundaries of our lands. Our moment in history and the places we live in are not an accident. God has placed us alongside each other. So as you say goodbye, who can you thank God for? Secondly, saying goodbye is an opportunity to choose God's will over our own preferences. The Ephesian leaders wouldn't have chosen Paul to leave them, yet Paul had become convinced that God wanted him to travel to Jerusalem. As things turn out, in Jerusalem Paul will be arrested. He'll make it to Rome, but as a prisoner. Eventually, he'll die there. Paul's words indicate that God had already given him an inkling of what faced him: prison and hardships. So there's no sweetness for either Paul or the Ephesian elders as they part. Perhaps you don't relish the endings you face either. You don't feel ready to say goodbye or to move on, or to face the big wide world as a graduate. As we're denied our wishes, goodbyes prompts us to ask us what matters most. Here's Paul's answer. My only aim is to finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me, the task of testifying to the good news of God's grace. So saying goodbye is an opportunity to accept and to recommit ourselves to God's will over our own preferences. Seasons will come and go, as will relationships. Yet, as the scenery and our friendships change, we're asked, what are you really living for? So goodbyes are an opportunity to give thanks, to take stock about what we're living for. Thirdly, They can help us prepare for the future. This is probably the main reason Paul calls the Ephesian elders to meet him. Like in a relay race, he's passing on the baton of responsibility to these younger leaders. And as he does so, Paul uses the opportunity to articulate his fears and concerns for them. They will face danger. What Paul calls savage wolves, people with false motives, preoccupied with themselves, will distort the message about Jesus. The church's leaders must actively keep watch and be on guard if they and the others entrusted to them aren't to be placed in peril. Yet they don't face these dangers alone. Paul commits them to God and to the word of his grace. God's presence and his word will continue to build and grow these leaders even in Paul's absence. That's why as they part, everyone prays together. It reminds them that no one is indispensable, not even Paul. For us, change provides fresh opportunities to look to the one who bought us with his own blood. He goes with us, he builds us up, and he is able to hold us throughout life and even as we face death. Which is why with Jesus, goodbyes are never ultimately goodbyes. The word goodbye is a contraction of the phrase, God be with you. It used to be the way people blessed others as they left. Other ways of saying goodbye, like see you later, retain the hope that our partings are temporary. Saying goodbye this term might involve tears. But for Christians, being parted through relocation or even in death isn't ultimate. Because as painful as our separations are, we look to a shared future with Jesus, a future without tears, where we'll never be parted. That means goodbye need no longer be the saddest word, but a reminder that with Jesus, there's always more to come.